Good morning, Chris.
Good morning, Mr. Mark.
How are you?
Peachy Keen Jelly Bean, how are you, sir?
I'm doing good. I'm actually working out of Calgary. I told everybody yesterday, this backdrop isn't my normal backdrop. This is, it's a place called Nicer Work in Calgary. It's a sort of a chain of co-work spaces. Very, very cool. So big shout out for Nicer Work people. If you're in Calgary, come visit. But that's not the point of the story. This is an ad about you and Be West Interactive. I promised you I would mention that at least 12 times during the show. Be West Interactive, Be West Interactive. I am super stoked to talk to you. You know, and you were actually, I want to give the big shout out. When BrandDIY didn't exist in anybody's imagination, you were doing my SEO. And you said, Mark, do you realize this book that you wrote called BrandDIY, that people are actually downloading it? Would you like to make some money on it? And I said, well, who knew? And so you set up the BrandDIY group. You're the one who was responsible for this whole mess.
And I have to say, like, phenomenal job as well. Like, it's interesting because we set up a group, Chris and I set up the SEO group at the same time as yours. It's kind of a test case of like, okay, what we're going to do, we're going to help get Mark to do. And you've gone ahead and like outdone us completely. Like, it's a testament to, I think, dedication, finding your voice, and publishing on a daily basis. Like, that's super important.
Well, you know, people are always like, oh, Mark, you're such a monster of content. And, you know, I don't even see it as that. To me, I think you have to flip the perspective. You have to go, I'm a brand guy, and I've forgotten more about brands than most people will ever know. However, I've forgotten a lot about brands. So every day I have to go on for 15 minutes and talk about something new. And that forces me to go back to all the books, all the way like, you know, Claude Hopkins and Laskin and David Ogilvy and Rosser, all the way up to Seth Godin, and find something to talk about. Inevitably, these are all things that I know, but I've forgotten, you know? So it's crazy that it forces you to remember stuff. And other people think that you're smarter, but you also go, oh, this is really cool because it makes me remember how much fun it used to be and all the stuff I used to do, you know?
When you kind of are, I'll say, for lack of a better term, the expert in something, you oftentimes, you're continuing learning as well. So you kind of get on higher level. And then you forget about the real basic stuff that people who are just jumping into the industry like really want to know about. And that's the same thing with SEO. Like I'm like way up here oftentimes, and my brain hurts with all the work I'm doing. But most people are like way down here, and it's like it's refreshing sometimes to just come back to basics and just talk about the simple things that everybody needs to know.
Yeah, it's totally true. And it makes it really fun to build something and then have people feed off of it and go, oh, I used this, I saw that, I watched this, and I did this. And you're like, oh, it's so cool that you get to actually help people. It's really cool. And it's down to you because you helped start it.
Yeah.
You did it, man. So I want to talk to you today about minimalist SEO. I mean, you are a guy, you're really good with a soundbite. And I got to say that minimalist SEO really hits a nerve, because to me, SEO is black magic. There's a ton of people doing it. Every article that I've read about it makes me go, it seems so backward and stilted. You know, we were talking before the show. If you're going to write a piece of content, you have to look up the words that are ranking, and then you have to write your story around those words, and then you have to have the H1, H2, H3 headlines and the alt text, and you're like, screw this bullshit. I'm just going to write a nice story about how to choose a picture, you know? And it's just, it seems so clunky, but it doesn't have to be that way.
No, it totally doesn't have to be clunky at all. The crazy part about SEO is that there's so much information out there. And because SEO has changed and evolved, the information out there should technically change as well. But it really hasn't, right? Like there's like, I belong to a lot of blogging Facebook groups, and I go through and people are like, oh, I need to have to do the SEO. How do I do SEO? And I'm getting there and I'm typing them like a storm. Like, oh, no, that's not how you do it. It's like, that is not the way to do it. And people get caught up on the technical side of things. And that's not the way to do it. So this is kind of one of those aha moments in my life that really defined kind of almost everything that I do. It goes back to McDonald's. Everything goes back to McDonald's.
Everything.
It was a Saturday morning, and I was working the egg station. And Saturday morning on the egg station is a death trap, because you have those little egg rings, and you can cook 8 eggs at a time, and that's it. And people are ordering by the thousands, right? Like shove those sausage eggers in their mouth.
Yeah.
You're going and you're cracking eggs, and you fall behind. And if you fall behind, the boss comes over and helps you out, and you don't want that. I fell behind, and the boss came over and helped me out, and I was like, oh no. So she's cooking up a storm, and she's like, Chris, what is the proper cooking time? Chris, what is the temperatures? Chris, what is this? What is this?
Oh no, so she's just making you nuts.
And she's grilling me with all these pieces of information, and I was just like egg rage, and I smashed my hand on the grill, and I was like, stop asking me all these questions. Just tell me how to do it better.
Yeah.
And she said no. And I was like, whoa. She's like, you have to know the why. Once you know the why, the how will fall into place all the time. And I was like, whoa.
Yeah.
Like Yoda is working the egg station with me. So when I try to do SEO and teach people SEO, I don't want to teach the how. I want to teach the why, because the why will invariably follow up with the how. Like, for example,
right.
Let's say we're doing a Google search right now. We open up Google and we say how to install a light bulb or something like that, right? Now you've got the search results in your mind. Which one do you pick? Usually you're going to pick that top result, right? But if you don't pick the number one result, which one are you picking?
To me, I don't know, personally, I look at the ones that are paid for, and I always skip past those, and I go to the first one that isn't paid for. That's what I do personally.
Yeah. So oftentimes you'll grab that first one, but you can also look at what catches your eye.
That's right. I might go to 4 or 5 down and go, the first one is bullshit, but the third one has a longer headline, and it really kind of gets at what I'm looking for.
So that's the optimization right there, is how can we capture the person's attention when they're in the search results? So, and again, then that's the why. Now the how is, how do we do that? And that's when you get into the technical side. Okay, well, you can change that title tag, change that meta description, that type of thing. So you really got to understand why you're doing something. I mean, the fact is, when someone goes to Google, they are Google's customer, right? And Google needs to know that you're going to take care of their customer. And so that's
that you're not going to spam them, or you're not going to just throw a million keywords in there. And
exactly. So Google looks at like authority. So like links coming to your site, time on site, the content, what it's all about. And you could kind of knock yourself out for days trying to figure out what are all the things that Google is trying to look for. But the fact is, if you just think of it from an SEO philosophical standpoint, Google is just taking care of their customer. Okay, now you take care of your customer, and Google is going to help you out. Like, that's really the most simplest way to sum up SEO without getting into the technical side of things.
Right. So, but what do we do? You know, I'm sitting here, and I put out a lot of content, and I mean, honestly, every single one of the posts that we put up on BrandDIY, I put up on my YouTube channel, and now I've been thinking of putting all those things up in like newsletters, or pop them into blog posts.
Yeah.
So then I'm sitting there with a blog post with Chris Whiteley, Minimalist SEO, Be West Interactive. Where do I start? What do I do?
Well, kind of like where you start and where you do are almost two different things. Like there's a process for kind of everything. And we talked before about for the show about about McDonald's, the station observation checklist. So for those who weren't blessed to ever have worked at McDonald's,
poor people,
they have created, I don't know if it's still true now, but in the 90s it was what's called a station observation checklist.
It's still true.
This is basically a process to work every single station so that any monkey could do it. And really, that's what minimalist SEO is all about, is trying to ensure that we can have a process for everything that involves with SEO, so anyone can kind of do it. Step 1, do this. Step 2, do this. Step 3, do this. And the thing is, with SEO, with content, that list technically never ends. Like a piece of content is like a bonsai tree. Once you publish it, you're not done with it. In fact, publishing it should be the most simplest part. Like, if you're going to go craft this amazing piece of content on your website, you spend like weeks and weeks and weeks on it, and then poof, you push it out, and you're like, nothing.
Yeah.
Okay. That is a waste of your time. Right? So I'm more of a shoot first, ask questions later. Basically, create content and then do all of the SEO. So that's again, one of the SOCs that I'm working on called reverse SEO, where you don't do all that heavy lifting research first. What you do is, what is the problem that
You're trying to solve, that your customer has? Yeah.
Solve that problem, publish it out there, and then you can use tools such as Google Search Console to see what keywords Google has decided that content is about, and then optimize after the fact. So it's
okay. So the first thing to do, I write a story on. Oh, sorry. So I write a story on how to write better ad copy, and I pop it up, and then I run it through Google Search Console to find out what keywords Google is pulling out of there and saying, hey, these are the ones that are good ones, and then I can go back to my content and tweak it.
Well, sort of, but to more get into the technical side of, you don't run it through Google Search Console. What Google Search Console is Google's way of telling you, here's where we put you on the internet. So it's not even Google saying, this is what your content is about. It's like, this is where we put you on the internet right now. And what you can do then is, I kind of say is, there's on-page SEO where you kind of optimize for a keyword. What you do is you find those keywords that Google has chosen for you, optimize your content for the ones that you like the best, and that's reinforcing Google's decision. So a lot of SEO is kind of working against Google, trying to game the system, where this is working in tandem with Google. Say, okay, Google, you decided that for me. I like it. Let's work together. Let's make this happen. So that is kind of the way to do it, is work with Google.
Yeah.
Don't fight against Google.
Don't fight Google.
Exactly. Yeah. and it's like, it's these types of tactics that that we need to follow, especially when we don't have much time. Like Chris Burge and I, right?
Yeah.
There's 2 of us in the agency. Well, there's kind of 3 of us, but we have like the throughput of a big agency. We've got the client list of a big agency, but there's only 2 of us. So we need to be efficient in the way we do things. And it's all of these minimalist kind of tactics that help us save time. Right? And that's what entrepreneurs need too. They need time. They don't want to be sitting around trying to figure out, okay, how do I do this SEO thing? I need to create some content. What do I do? Like you spend 90% of your time spinning your wheels planning, whereas you can spend 90% of your time creating, 10% of the time after the fact.
Right. That makes a ton of sense. So let's get to the nitty gritty.
Okay.
What are the things that the entrepreneurs need to know? I mean, what could they take away from this talk right now and implement right now?
Okay.
Give them just at least a starting block. Hold on, before you do that though, I want to mention for everybody who's watching this that in the show notes, I am going to be putting links to you, obviously through Facebook, so they can click on your name and find you on BrandDIY, and you're actually setting up a whole bunch of tools, and you will basically grab people's information, and when the tools are released, you're going to feed them to them, right?
Yeah. And we need people we need action takers, people that are going to kind of put this to the test. So it's basically, it's the whole reverse SEO process, as well as the philosophy of minimalist SEO. We need feedback. Like I do it on a daily basis. I know how it works. I need people who speak English to actually translate it from technical to English for me. So
all the human speakers. Well, that's what we'll do. We'll make sure, I'm going to put it up in big block letters that people have to get a hold of you if they want to get better at SEO, and you're going to let them in on the tools, the minimalist SEO tools and the reverse SEO tools. So, but give us a starting point. Okay, somebody's sitting there, they're staring at their website, they don't know what to write.
Okay. So if you don't know what to write about, that is the main key, number 1 right there, is figuring out what to write about. So you're an entrepreneur, you serve people. What is the most common question that the people you serve ask you? Or what is the biggest problem that they have? From that point, you just need to almost just like list out all of the problems that people have. From there, if you don't have any ideas, there's great tools online. There's a website called Answer the Public, where basically you type in a term and it spits out all the questions that people are asking. There's a website called Quora where people go to ask questions.
Really? Quora, yeah, I know Quora, yeah.
Yeah, so there's so many, even if you even just type your topic into Google, there's a little section that says people also ask. And it's got a whole bunch of questions. Like, if you're new to kind of creating content, create content around questions that people ask. It's the easiest content to rank for, because, well, basically, you know exactly what someone is looking for. Like that's one of the, without getting too much into the weeds in this, in keyword research, you need to figure out search intent. You need to understand what someone is trying to accomplish.
Fine. Yeah.
Right? So if you do a search for tennis rackets, Google's going to show you a whole bunch of stuff because they don't know what you're talking about. But if you type in, how do I string a tennis racket, you know exactly what that person is looking for. So questions are really easy to come up with a search intent. So you basically create a piece of content around that question, you publish it. And then what you do is you can set up Google Search Console on your website. It's a tool offered by Google. You can go in there after the fact and say, okay, here are the keywords that I'm now ranking for. And you can say, okay, what variations of that question am I ranking for? Now let's go in and let's optimize for that. That's kind of the process there.
So Google Search Console is something I can just install. It's just like a plugin for Google.
Yeah, it's basically, it's much like you've used Google Analytics before, right?
Yeah, I've got it on my computer. Yeah.
It's basically, it's the brother to Google Analytics. Whereas Analytics is telling you about how people are using your site, Google Search Console is telling you how Google views your site, its health. So you can kind of see, like, are there any errors on your site? Can Google find your site? How many links are pointing to your site? Like, it's a must-have. It's really confusing to start, but again, from a minimalist standpoint, there's some real basics in there that you can get in there and get a real handle on exactly what's in there.
That's fantastic. So I install Google Search Console. Google Search Console takes a look at my site or the piece of content that I linked that to, and it says, you know, this is answering a lot of these type of questions, or this is how we see it at Google.
Yeah.
This is what we're looking at. And you're going, oh man, I totally was misread. That's not at all what I wanted to say. That's not at all what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
And you can go back and fix. So you get, I guess, kind of outsider feedback. That's what it is.
Exactly. You get algorithm feedback, right? Like who do you want feedback from? Do you want feedback from, your grandma who's reading your post, or do you want feedback from Google, who is Google? Like, yeah, that's the way to do it.
Yeah. I think grandma might be nicer, but Google will probably help me a lot more. All right. So Google Search Console, tip number one. Is there anything else? What else do you come up against, as people are talking to you? What's the most common things that people are asking you and common problems that they have?
Well, I think the most common problems I get is people come up to me and say, how do I do SEO? Like they say, where do I start?
Yeah.
That's the big question, right? And my answer is always like, just solve problems, take imperfect action, create that content, and realize that once you publish something, it's not done. So going into like the next step, kind of after you published the piece of content, you've used Google Search Console, this is where Google Analytics comes in. All of a sudden, now you can see how people are engaging with your content, because that's something that's really important to Google, right? Engagement. If your content isn't engaging with people, you're not solving problems. So one of the things that I always look at in Google Analytics is bounce rate. So what that is someone has come to the search results, typed in a keyword, they've clicked on your site, they've looked at it, and then they've clicked the back button. That's a bounce. And that's an indication to Google that person did not find what they were looking for. Google's going to use that to rank you. And basically, if you have a high enough bounce rate, Google's going to say, no, there's nothing here for my customers. So I'm going to move you like on position 90 or something like that. So looking at content that has had a significant amount of traffic and a high bounce rate from organic search is a good indicator of content that needs to be fixed. So either you're not ranking for the right keywords, or you're ranking for keywords that you're not actually writing about. And then again, that's when you go back to Google Search Console. So again, there's a process for this. There's a station observation checklist that can kind of take you through that process. But just me talking about, like, it sounds like a lot of, like, I'm getting into that witchcraft kind of stuff. But when you break things down into really incremental steps, it becomes a lot easier. And that's a lot of the stuff that I do. Is everything is a 3-step process, because if you turn it into this 15-point process, people get confused and lost along the way. All
right. So now if we were going to take the 3 steps that I just heard, the first one is type in what you'd like to write about.
Yeah.
Second thing is take a look at what people also searched that's related to that, so you can find out how they said it, how they mentioned it. So you might be able to hone your topic down. You go, oh, actually I meant to write more about this than about what I actually said. I'm going to steal that line, and then you use that as your new headline, and you keep referring back to that as the point of your story. So you write to what they, you write a solution to a problem that people have.
Yeah.
2, you check out what other people have written along those veins. So Google will list the stuff people also looked at, people also watched. And then you take the Google Search Console and you just play with it a little bit, see what it gives you, see if Google is reading your story the way that you're reading, that you're intending the story to be written.
Right.
And then you can go, oh my God, no, I didn't mean to answer that problem. I meant to answer this. Well, maybe you might want to change a few words, give it back to Google. The bounce rate then logically should go down,
Right.
because if you're promising people something and giving them that thing, then they're going to stay on your page a lot longer and not back out of it so quickly.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So I got it right.
What's that?
I got it right?
Yeah. Yeah. That's totally
cool. Okay, good.
Yeah, you're totally picking it up. See, when it's simplified like that, it's really easy. I mean, there's a lot of other parts and pieces. Like, one of the things with SEO people talk about is authority, is getting links to your site, right? That, link building, that sounds like such a crazy thing.
Well,
you know what it is?
What do you do? What do you do with link building? Link building, people come to me and they say, we'd like to link to your site. Do you want to link to our site? And I'm like, what? I don't even know what I'm supposed to do with that.
Yeah, ignore those ones, because that gets into the technical side of things. So basically, that is like a mutual link exchange, and Google's going to say, okay, site A is linking to site B, and they're linking back to each other. Well, they cancel each other out, so we're not going to pass any authority. But from a guy who does SEO for companies, we go through and do link building, where basically we reach out to as many people as possible, send them an email and say, hey, check out this great piece of content. Can you link to it? But the average person doesn't have the time to do that. So
yeah, I never do.
Minimalist SEO, one of the processes that I'm, again, kind of developing and turning into an SOC is, tentatively, I'm calling it serendipity link building. Basically what this is being a good human and promoting your content. It's like networking, right? So the process is you find people who are in the same niche as you, running with the same topics, go to their blog, comment on their stuff, build a relationship with them, be friends, because friends help friends. And then once you're kind of built this relationship with this person, they're either going to naturally read your content and link to it too, or you can come to them and say, hey, yeah, would you mind linking to my article from this page right here? And they'll be like, yeah, friend, I would love to do that. Whereas in the SEO world, if I reach out to someone and say, hey, person that I just met, can you link to my article? They'll be like, yeah, sure, man, I'll send you an invoice. And it's like, oh, right. So, the average entrepreneur doesn't want to.
I never gave that answer, but that's a good answer.
Yeah. So
I'll send you an invoice.
Yeah. So it's totally like, you can either like be huge and do a lot of technical SEO and purchase links and do tons of outreach and use all these fancy tools, if you're like a big corporation in a heavy competitive industry. But if you're a local business or an entrepreneur, you need to be thinking strategically about this. Like, just think of it as being in a networking group. That's really what this is all about. Is you're helping people, you're solving problems, you're making friends. That's what SEO really is.
Yeah, just you just reduced it to such a simple thing. Even the link building, right?
Yeah.
I know people like yourself who are really smart, and I say, hey, I'm going to write a story about SEO, or I'm going to do this post. Do you have anything that I can give folks? And then I just put that link into the show notes here, or in this case, I refer them back to your Facebook profile, because you don't have your shit together and you haven't actually built stuff yet. So I do that. But ideally, I would link them to your minimalist SEO one-pager or your reverse SEO one-pager on your site. And I'm thrilled to do that, because I feel like I'm doing my posse a service here.
Yeah.
And that just makes sense. But yeah, I love that. I love that answer, because I get it all the time. People going, hey, love your posts. Would you link to our site about, laundry detergent? And I'm like, what? You don't know me from Adam.
Yeah.
But that's a great answer. Where do I send the invoice?
Yeah. I mean, it's the same thing in every industry, right? There's going to be the people who are genuine and doing a service to others. Then there's going to be the sharks that are out there.
Yeah.
And in the branding world, it's the same thing. There's the people who are just out there to make a quick buck. And then there's the people like you who are trying to actually help people understand how to, share their business with the world. I mean, branding and SEO, it's one of those like kind of things.
Well, that's just the thing, the core to branding, the very first step in branding is you say, what do I believe I'm offering the world? But the very close second and the more important part of that is the opposite side of the table. What do folks want? that I could possibly solve. And that's the big one. And that's where most people go awry right out of the gate. They all kind of know what they want to build, but they don't know if anybody's actually looking for that. And SEO, to me, I have a great story. I helped launch a search engine, a search term company back a long time ago. And this was back in the day when I was really hot and horny about promoting future-proof brands, because what a sexy term. It's just so sexy. And future-proof. I'm all about future-proof. And I had futureproofbrands.com, future-proof brand seminar, and my business was going nowhere. And then the guy who actually started the search term company, he said, Mark, do you ever wonder why nobody's actually coming up and saying, I want a future-proof brand? He says, why don't we do a search on it? And we dialed in future-proof brands and came up with 0 people looking. Nobody's looking for a bloody future-proof brand.
Yeah.
But it's so obvious in hindsight. I was so wiped out. I thought, oh my God, my baby. I was so convinced that the world wanted future-proof brands and nobody wanted them.
It can be devastating sometimes when you've got this great idea.
Yeah.
No one else is aligned with it. And that's, one of the things that happens especially with SEO as well, is people have this brilliant idea. They go into that research phase and then they find out that no one else has this idea. So in some cases that can be beneficial though, right? Because you can be have the first mover advantage. If suddenly future-proof brands becomes this huge topic and you've been writing about it before anyone else, well, by virtue of that, you're probably going to be ranking higher. But again, that becomes it's much like in the social media area. It's like, oh, you don't want to compete for these higher hashtags. Okay, we'll create your own hashtag, right? And then you can kind of promote that one hashtag. But again, that becomes a really big job, a lot of heavy lifting in terms of now you're promoting this new thing, and that brings it back to branding almost as well, right?
Yeah, well, it's a terrible place to be. I can tell you that from experience.
Yeah.
I mean, when I was in sustainability, that was a terrible place to be because it was so far forward that it wasn't yet acceptable. And the show that I'm doing tomorrow is actually about a concept called Maya, M-A-Y-A, which was a term coined by Raymond Loewy, the guy who designed Lucky Strike and those streamlined trains and the Studebaker. And he built so much stuff. Basically, he designed the 20th century. And they asked him what his secret was for creating all these design hits. And he said, it's down to one thing, Maya, most advanced yet acceptable. So to create something that's really far forward, but not so far forward that people don't get it.
Gotcha. Yeah, that makes sense.
And you're like, oh, there you go. Because if you design the Segway scooter, people are going to go, that's so cool. What do I do?
Yeah.
You design TiVo when nobody even knows that skipping commercials is a problem. And you go, what? That's really cool. But, and then same thing with the hashtags, right? You go, you can't push so far beyond the comfort zone that people are just like, hats off, great work. Let us know how it works.
Yeah.
But well, anyway, listen, I want to wrap this up. Okay. Folks who are in the group, I'm going to put your name and your link in there. I want them to go and put their hand up and say, when you get this stuff built, we want to test it out for you. So minimalist SEO stuff, reverse SEO stuff. We've got 500 or 450 plus members here. Want them beta testing your stuff. And and the Google Search Console, I'm also going to put a link to that so that folks can take a look at that.
Yeah, and I've been training on how to set up Google Search Console as well.
Well, they can check in with you on that exactly.
one. Oh yeah, it's all set up. And of course, if anybody is not wanting to have that whole DIY thing and have someone do it for you, then bewest.ca is our site. So if someone's just like, I just don't have the time, I want someone to do it for me.
Yeah, no, I'm going to put that. I'm going to put that in the show notes as well, so folks can just click on it and get directly to you.
Perfect.
All right, sir. Thank you so much for taking the time and making me smarter.
It was my pleasure. It was a lot of fun.
Awesome. I'll talk to you later. Chris Whiteley.
Okay. All right.
Take care.
Thanks,
Bye.
Kid.